What gets confusing is people look at the handful of things that have been added in the last few years as that is the effect of the levy. So we look at the 2 additional patrol deputies, we look at the additional money spent in the district attorney's office, and we say, okay, well, that's what the levy did. Without the levy, we wouldn't have those things. And that's certainly true. But really, the picture of this levy is much more about the other side of it, about what we would have lost if we did not have the levy. The county was operating in a wholly unsustainable way and would not have been able to continue drawing on those reserves more than about a year. But if you look at the $2 million hole that existed back then, as Commissioner Weathers said, it's, that's, more than a dozen positions in staff. You can't remove that much money from the budget without radically changing how the county does business and the sorts of services that people see from the county. The 2019 levy was about increasing services. There was a pair of measures, and the result of the 2 of them would have been to stabilize things, basically to stop the spending of reserves and to add significant services. That failed. The public voted against that. So the one that was put up in 2020 was one that was really about stabilizing services at the current level, with just a very small number of enhancements where it was felt it was necessary because the sheriff was in a situation where without these 2 deputy positions, the ability to deliver the service that the public was expecting was seriously compromised. So that made sense to put in that way. But really, the entire levy has been about stabilizing finances, stopping the spending of reserves, which don't exist anymore, and to do so in the most frugal manner, so that the public is paying the smallest tax possible at 78 cents. It was debated. I mean, the original numbers were $1.50, $1.40. There were numbers all over the place, and people just kept coming back and sharpening their pencils and looking for ways to make it smaller, and came back with 78 cents. And with 78 cents, we've been able to do a remarkable job at stopping the erosion of the reserves and at maintaining services at a reasonable and acceptable level. So I totally agree with the sheriff that I think anything above 78 cents is going to be a non-starter. This is not a good, the public told us with the 2019 levy that they didn't want to see more. They wanted to see us stabilize what we had. And I think that's what was done. And I think that the smart thing to do would be to go out with the same, basically the same message and the same financial picture, and to put it to the public and get their decision on whether they want to maintain these services as they're seeing them today, or whether they're willing to accept a significant cut in services in order to see their tax bill go down. I guess that's where I'll stop.
And trying to educate the public about what it could mean if this doesn't pass. Can you refresh us on what the statutory requirements are for the sheriff's department if this weren't to pass, and what's like the minimum that the county needs to provide?
So the sheriff statutorily has to have a civil division, and so that division was where we added one position. We hadn't added a position for over 40 years in that division. So have to have that. You have to have a jail. You have to have search and rescue, and you have to have patrol. And then the sheriff is required to transport prisoners and transport people. We also do transports to like mental health facilities and things like that, but that's a statutory requirement of the sheriff, and the sheriff is statutorily required to do court security. And so everything that was funded were statutory requirements. However, you have to have those services, but the level at which you can provide them is obviously based on the amount of resources that you have.
So if the levy were to not pass, and then there's still some general dollars, do you feel like those positions could still be maintained?
If the levy didn't pass, I mean, there's gonna be cuts everywhere. And, you know, again, like you look at, you know, it's been mentioned here already, but you look at the enforcement division, the patrol piece of it, you know, you start cutting your coverage basically. And so, you know, you do whatever amount of coverage you can with the resources that you have. And then there's reality too. If you are working for an entity that doesn't have stability or has financial problems, people aren't as apt to stay. And you know, the unfortunate reality is oftentimes those entities can't provide for the people working for them, and as well as other entities can. And so they just, your staff retention, it becomes an issue as well. But you know, you have to have some staff to do some of these things because they are required and there's no way around them. The bottom line is we have to provide those, but it's based on resource.
Commissioner Babitz, do you have more comments?
Yeah, I think the sheriff's been really, you know, careful in his words, and I certainly appreciate that. But the reality of things is level of service is what it's all about. There's $4.1 million in the sheriff's budget this year. It's the vast majority of the general fund dollars. So therefore, if you're to take $2.4 million out of the general fund, it's going to radically affect the level of service that the sheriff can deliver, as well as many other departments. But when you look at things like elections, you can't do half of an election. So we're not going to be doing half of an election. We're not going to be able to do half of tax collection. But when you look at patrol, you can do half of patrol. You can do patrol for fewer hours, and that's it's going to be things like that. There are only options in a world without this levy, and that's why I think it's important just to remind folks that this is all about stabilizing services at the current level, and this is not an extravagant or spendthrift sort of thing. This is a situation where attempting to avoid major cuts to services. It's not threats. We're not saying we're closing down the counties, but if you're going to take $2.4 million out of a general fund of our size, you're going to feel it.